so more than 20 years ago. Now, I'll give way.
Minister, for giving way on this point about Labour being Russophobic. As somebody that lived and worked in Russia for 3 years, I was director of the British Council in St. Petersburg. We worked every day with ordinary Russians who want that country to be a normal country connected to the rest of the world. Good people. I can tell the Minister that the people we're talking about today are not ordinary Russians. We're talking about a former KGB spy. We're talking about the woman who is married to a former Deputy Finance Minister who's given millions of pounds to the Conservative Party. So I would humbly ask him to withdraw the comment about Russophobia. We have no problem with the Russian people. We have a big problem with what he is talking about today.
No,
Our motion.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The United Kingdom has long been a defender of freedom, democracy and human rights. And our country has proudly stood firm against crime and corruption at every opportunity. It is therefore, frankly, astonishing that at a time when Vladimir Putin is committing war crimes in Europe, a UK government minister is being dragged to this dispatch box to defend his own Prime Minister's murky and deep links to Russian oligarchs. It really does tell you all you need to know about this government that, in his previous role as Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister chose to party with the family of an ex-KGB agent just weeks after British citizens there were attempted assassinations on them by Russian state agents on our own home soil. But it is utterly outrageous that the Prime Minister would nominate to the House of Lords someone who has promoted some of the very worst conspiracy theories in defence of the Putin regime. We are used to the Prime Minister putting his own interests before the interests of the British people. But on this occasion, he's gone further in putting his own personal friendships with the son and business partner of an ex-KGB agent before the safety and security of the British people. He has put his friendship with Lebedev ahead of his primary duty to the British public, to keep our country and our people safe and secure. That's why Labour is today calling for the government to publish the full security guidance about the peerage for Mr. Lebedev. By this we mean the version before it might be mysteriously airbrushed or sanitised, so the British public can really understand the severity of the Prime Minister's miscalculations and misjudgments. This is in the national interest, and it must happen immediately. We also know that the Prime Minister flew to Italy to attend a party hosted by the Lebedevs just 2 days after attending a high-level NATO summit that was focused on Russia in the wake of the Salisbury poisonings, without any officials present and without his security detail. And we know that he met the former KGB agent Alexander Lebedev at that party. We need to know what was discussed at that party and why the Prime Minister thought that that was a priority for him to go to that party and meet with influential members of the Russian elite at that time. Madam Deputy Speaker, this blasé attitude towards national security is not just a one-off. It is part of a pattern of behaviour that dates back several years. Because there are countless examples of where the government has played fast and loose with our national security. Just look at the Conservative Party's ongoing reliance on donations from individuals which are closely linked to the Kremlin. The most concerning is the £2 million of donations from Lyubov Chernukin, the wife of Putin's very own former Deputy Finance Minister. She moved in Conservative inner circles, even playing tennis with the Prime Minister. We may never quite know just how much influence that money bought for Putin's allies. In connection to this, I'm deeply concerned by the Conservative Party's own use of lawfare to bat away questions that I have asked about potential national security threats that predate the issues that we're discussing today. In February 2019, I wrote to the then chair of the Conservative Party, the member for Great Yarmouth, asking him to investigate donations by Ehud Yudi Sheleg, who had been reported in the media as having strong connections to Russia and probably not able to afford the £1.8 million of donations that he had made to the Conservative Party that may or may not be connected with him being appointed as Treasurer of the Conservative Party. I would not wish to speculate. The reply I received from the Honourable Member was that it made clear that Mr. Schelleg should not need to reveal the source of his wealth. It also threatened me with libel action, with the Honourable Member for Great Yarmouth, who is now the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, using the same tactics that Russian oligarchs have been using to silence criticism and block investigation.
Order. I do need to make sure that the Honourable Gentleman is referring to the matter in hand regard to Lord Lebedev and the process. Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What I'm trying to do is set out clearly the worrying pattern of behaviour, but I take the feedback that Madam Deputy Speaker has given me, and I will move on. This brings us, of course, to the issue of the Russia report. The delay in publishing the Russia report and the failure to implement the vast majority of the recommendations until after Vladimir Putin clearly felt that he could invade Ukraine with impunity is part of the challenge that we face around standing up to the bullying and intimidation of authoritarian rulers around the world. And the delays in implementing the recommendations of the Russia report are deeply troubling. Why was this action delayed, as we have repeatedly asked in this House? But perhaps because on this government's watch, we've seen the City of London become a laundromat for the dirty money of kleptocrats. Absolutely. And because the Conservative Party have been all too reliant on those highly questionable donations that we are discussing today. We also, Madam Deputy Speaker, have seen serious issues around the underfunding of our armed forces, which has left us with Putin being able to go on the march from Georgia to Crimea, and we are seeing authoritarian regimes growing in confidence over the last decade because of the weakness of Western leaders, because of the conflict of interests that undermines their authority. And it's that conflict of interests that we are exposing today in this debate. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is time for us to shore up our national defences. That needs to be done through pieces of legislation such as the National Security and Investment Bill. And it is disappointing that we haven't seen a clear enough position on that, with the government watering down definitions of critical national infrastructure within that bill to make it that's making it harder for the Secretary of State to call in investments that are suspected of being a danger to our national security. Our legislation on foreign takeovers and investment is far weaker than the equivalent legislation of our allies in all of the other Five Eyes countries. Madam Deputy Speaker, allow me to conclude by saying this. National security is the first duty of any government. But Conservative ministers have been putting rubles before resilience. They've been putting investment before integrity. We need to see what is in this security advice. And we need to know on which date the Prime Minister received the security services concerns with regard to Lord Lebedev's appointment. We also need to know why that was watered down. The appointments to the House of Lords should be on the basis of loyal public service to our country, not on the basis of friendship with the Prime Minister. Yet the Prime Minister continues to dismiss vital advice time and again, even when Britain's national security is at stake, to serve his own personal interests. I therefore encourage members of the benches opposite to join us today in standing up for Britain's national security. Thank you.
Alison Thulis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Saturday,